love with another woman.
What are you saying to me?
Sandy, please!
The Secret Behind the Smile. On October 29, 2024, Hollywood said goodbye to one of its brightest lights. Teri Garr wasn't just another actress. She was the kind of performer who could make an entire theater laugh with a single line, then break your heart the very next moment.
Good morning. He smells just the way a man should smell. Clean.
From Young Frankenstein to Tootsie, her energy seemed endless, her timing flawless, and her smile unforgettable. But what audiences didn't know was that behind that smile, Garr was fighting a hidden battle that lasted for decades. Even while the cameras rolled, even while the applause filled the room, her body was quietly betraying her. Few people in Hollywood could have guessed the struggle she carried alone for so long. And yet, her story wasn't just about illness, it was about defiance. It was about a woman who refused to let her hardships define her, who took pain and turned it into both art and advocacy. But before the fame, before the illness, and before the resilience that made her a legend, there was a childhood filled with both glitter and heartbreak. And that's where her journey really begins. Born into show business, raised by hardship.
I went into a restaurant and I ordered soup, and I took a bite of the soup and my tongue fell off.
Teri Garr's story began in the very heart of entertainment. Her father, Eddie Garr, lit up vaudeville stages with his quick-witted comedy, while her mother, Phyllis Lind, graced audiences as one of the original Rockettes at Radio City Music Hall. From the outside, it looked like a childhood destined for sparkle and spotlight. But the truth was far from glamorous. When Teri was just 11 years old, her father died suddenly, leaving the family devastated, financially and emotionally. Overnight, the curtain fell on the stability she had known. The young girl who grew up watching her parents shine on stage now had to face life without a father and with a mother struggling to hold everything together. It was dance that gave her an escape. By age 6, she was already training relentlessly, often until her feet bled. By 14, her determination had earned her a place with ballet companies in San Francisco and Los Angeles. While other kids her age were hanging out at diners or going to dances, Teri was on buses across the city, chasing perfection in mirrored studios. That same hunger would become her greatest weapon. When the odds stacked against her, she didn't back down. She worked harder. And it was that fire which eventually carried her from crowded studios to the background of some of the biggest stages in Hollywood. Because the next step in her journey wasn't just about survival, it was about catching the eye of a king, dancing in the shadows of a king. In the early 1960s, the Hollywood dream often started in the background. And that's exactly where Teri Garr found herself, on the glittering sets of Elvis Presley musicals. She appeared in 9 of them, from Kissin' Cousins to Viva Las Vegas. Most audiences never spotted her. She was one of dozens of dancers blending into the whirlwind of sequins and synchronized moves. But here's the thing, Teri wasn't just there to dance. She was quietly studying everything. How Elvis drew the camera's gaze, how the actors projected emotions in even the simplest scenes, how the whole machine of stardom worked. Those film sets weren't just jobs, they were her training ground. And then came the moment that proved exactly what kind of person she was. When she auditioned for West Side Story in Los Angeles, the casting team brushed her aside. For most young performers, that kind of rejection stings enough to end the dream, but not Teri. The very next day, she walked back into that same audition, this time in different clothes, with a different hairstyle and a new confidence, essentially disguising herself as someone else. The gamble worked. She landed a place in the road company at just 16 years old. That small victory revealed her greatest strength, persistence, mixed with creativity. She refused to let one no dictate her future, and that pattern carried through every stage of her career. By the late 1960s, Garr began collecting small speaking parts on television. One week, she was a guest star on Dr. Kildare. Another week, she was on Batman or Star Trek. They weren't glamorous jobs. Sometimes she had just 1 or 2 lines, but she gave each role a spark that made people remember her. She was quirky, funny, and just a little unpredictable. It wasn't lost on her that her father, Eddie Garr, had once warned his kids about the humiliation of show business, calling it the lowest profession. Most people would have taken those words as a warning to stay away, but for Teri, they became fuel. If show business was the lowest profession, she was going to succeed at it on her own terms, prove that even the lowest could be elevated with talent and grit. And so she hustled. She kept dancing on shows like Shindig while sneaking her way into acting. She became the kind of performer who didn't wait for opportunity. She created it. Her climb wasn't overnight, but the foundation was being built. Every background step, every tiny role, every late-night bus ride across Los Angeles, it was all leading to one thing, her big break. And by the mid-1970s, Hollywood finally saw what she could do. That's when everything changed. Breaking through Hollywood's barriers. By 1974, after more than a decade of small parts, Teri Garr finally had her breakthrough. Francis Ford Coppola cast her in The Conversation, a quiet thriller about surveillance and paranoia. It wasn't a large role, but it showed something new. Garr could bring both subtle humor and depth, even in a serious story alongside Gene Hackman. That same year, she stepped into the role that made her unforgettable, Inga, the wide-eyed assistant in Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein. With a thick German accent and perfectly timed delivery, she transformed what could have been a forgettable sidekick into one of the film's most quoted characters. Her comedic instincts were undeniable, and audiences loved her. Hollywood began to see her differently. In 1977, Steven Spielberg cast her in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where she played Richard Dreyfuss's bewildered wife. The role was small, but Garr made it memorable by showing the strain of living with someone chasing an obsession. And then came Tootsie in 1982. As Sandy Lester, a struggling actress entangled in Dustin Hoffman's wild scheme, Garr was funny, tender, and deeply relatable. The performance earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, solid proof that she wasn't just a comic talent, but one of Hollywood's most versatile performers. Away from film, she became a regular on late-night television. David Letterman adored her. Her quick wit, playful teasing, and genuine charm made her one of his favorite guests throughout the 1980s. Critics like Pauline Kael even said Garr created a new archetype for female comedians: anxious yet likable, vulnerable yet sharp. By the early 80s, Teri Garr seemed unstoppable. Her career was soaring, her reputation secure. But just as Hollywood was embracing her at last, her body began to whisper the first warnings of a storm that no one could see coming. The first warning signs. At the height of her success, with her face on posters and her name in headlines, Teri Garr's body began to betray her in ways no one else could see. It started quietly, just a strange tingling in her right foot during the filming of Tootsie in 1983. At first, it seemed harmless, maybe stress, maybe exhaustion. But then came the fatigue, the occasional stumble, the sensation that her legs weren't always listening to her mind. On set, she brushed it off with jokes, determined not to let anyone suspect. In Hollywood, weakness could end a career, and Garr wasn't about to hand the industry a reason to push her aside. She kept moving, kept smiling, kept working. But privately, she bounced from doctor to doctor, chasing answers that never seemed to come. Some said stress, others hinted at neurological issues. Still, no one gave her the clarity she desperately needed. For nearly 2 decades, the pattern repeated itself. Symptoms would appear, then fade. Some days she felt almost normal. Others, it was like walking through quicksand. And still, she stayed silent. The secrecy became its own burden, heavier with every passing year. To the public, she was still the quick-witted actress lighting up talk shows and comedies. But behind closed doors, she was fighting an invisible enemy, one she couldn't even name. By the 1990s, whispers began circulating in the press. Fans speculated about her health, reporters asked quiet questions. Garr dodged them all with humor, never confirming, never admitting the truth. But inside, she knew the day would come when hiding wasn't possible anymore. And in 2002, nearly 20 years after those first tingling sensations, she made the decision that would change her life and her legacy forever. She stepped into the spotlight once more, not as a comedian or an actress, but as a woman finally revealing the secret battle she had carried alone. from secret struggle to public strength. In 2002, after nearly 20 years of silence, Teri Garr finally spoke the truth. Appearing on national television, she revealed that she had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. For fans, it was a shock. How could the woman who seemed endlessly energetic on screen have been fighting such a relentless disease in private? But for Garr, it was liberation. After years of hiding, she could finally speak openly about the battle that had shaped so much of her life. And instead of retreating, she leaned forward. Garr became one of the most recognizable advocates for MS awareness, using her celebrity to raise money for research and inspire others facing the same condition. She worked closely with the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, lending her humor and charm to campaigns that might otherwise have been bleak. For so many patients, seeing someone as beloved as Teri Garr confront MS head-on was proof that life didn't end with the diagnosis. It just changed. She also wrote about it. In 2005, Garr published her memoir, Speed Bumps: Flooring It Through Hollywood. With her trademark wit, she described the dizzying highs of her career and the unseen lows of her health struggles. She called the book Speed Bumps because, as she explained, life doesn't stop at an obstacle. You just slow down, get over it, and keep moving. It was a metaphor that fit her perfectly, but life wasn't done testing her. In 2006, she suffered a brain aneurysm, a medical emergency that nearly killed her. Recovery meant grueling rehabilitation, relearning basic movements, and once again adjusting her career to fit her changing body. Yet, true to form, she faced it with the same humor that had carried her through everything else. Where others might have collapsed into despair, Garr joked about wheelchairs, leaned on her daughter, and showed the world resilience in its purest form. Even as the roles slowed, she found new ways to share her talent. She turned to voice acting and made selective appearances, always delivering that spark of wit that defined her. She wasn't just an actress anymore. She was a symbol of survival, a reminder that Hollywood glamour can exist right alongside human struggle. Through it all, one thing remained clear. Teri Garr refused to let her illnesses define her. Instead, she redefined what it meant to be a star, not just on screen, but in the way she lived, thought, and inspired. A legacy beyond the spotlight. By the time Teri Garr stepped back from the screen, her influence was already carved into Hollywood's history. She wasn't just remembered for the laughs in Young Frankenstein or the heartache in Tootsie. She had redefined what it meant to be a comic actress. Critics pointed out how she blended vulnerability with razor-sharp wit, creating a blueprint for the female comedians who came after her. Stars who grew up watching Garr studied how she turned supporting roles into unforgettable ones, how she could steal a scene without ever overshadowing the story. But her impact wasn't limited to film and television. By sharing her battle with multiple sclerosis, she gave a voice to countless people who often felt invisible. She showed that illness didn't erase identity, it added depth to it. Through advocacy, public appearances, and her memoir, she shifted the way many Americans saw MS, replacing silence and stigma with humor and hope. Away from the spotlight, Garr found her greatest fulfillment in motherhood. In 1993, she adopted her daughter, Molly, and often said that raising her was the most meaningful role of her life. Even as her health declined, she poured herself into being present as a parent, cherishing the simple, everyday moments that mattered most. When Teri Garr passed away at age 79 in October 2024, surrounded by loved ones, Hollywood lost more than a star. It lost a fighter, a survivor, and a woman whose laughter had carried millions, even as her own body tested her at every turn. Her story is one of contradictions, joy mixed with pain, triumph shadowed by struggle, fame balanced with fierce privacy. And maybe that's why she remains so unforgettable. She wasn't just a Hollywood actress. She was proof that behind every spotlight, there's a human being carrying battles we may never see. The last curtain call. Teri Garr's life was full of laughter, courage, and quiet battles. She gave us unforgettable performances, turned hardship into strength, and left behind a legacy that reaches far beyond Hollywood.